All right, I will say good morning. I'm sorry. All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. So today's today's Os in Tzidkas HaTzaddik, we're continuing in Os Samech Zayin. So if you remember again, the Rabbi introduced us to a fascinating idea, namely the concept that as a person grows in their ruchnius, person grows in their spiritual level, by definition, that requires a new process of tshuva for one's past averos. Now, remember again, as I mentioned in yesterday's shir, this discussion, Reb Tzaddik is choosing a side, so to speak, in a machlokes that we saw in Maseches Yuma about what one does with the averos of their past. I committed an avera, I did tshuva, I didn't repeat the mistake. What do I do? How do I relate to that past? So we saw a very significant theological dispute. One opinion saying that once you're done, file it away, and assuming you have not committed the same avera again, leave it alone. You did your tshuva, case is closed, shut it out. And second opinion, quoting the pasuk, until negdi samid, my sin is constantly before me, the words of David HaMelech, that a person has to constantly do tshuva for the averos of the past, even if one has not gone ahead and repeated that mistake. Now I will say, just to say, I didn't mention this yesterday, I should mention it now. What's the svara for that? Right? I understand, I think most of us understand and relate very well to the first approach, which is you make a mistake, you do tshuva, let it go. Let it go. It's done. It's time to move on. Right? It sounds psychologically healthy, relationship-wise it's healthy. What's the svara for the second approach of the chatasi negdi samid, to keep my averos in front of me at all times, to never go ahead and forget, to constantly do tshuva, even though I've done tshuva and haven't repeated the mistake? On a basic level, the svara is, it's always good to remember what you're capable of. I remember someone once called me, this is going back a little while, someone once called me to ask me a particular shayla. He wanted to do something that was not permitted, which that happens all the time. I get calls like that. But I'm saying, like, he wanted to do something that wasn't permitted, but he wanted to do something that wasn't permitted. It was a gzeira, right? He wanted to do X. X was prohibited because it's a drabanan, because it may come to Y. And the person said to me, I'm telling you, I'm never going to do Y. I'm never going to do it. So I don't need to worry about this. And I said to the person, I said, Ploni, I'm like in awe of you, because the truth is, when I think about myself, there's nothing I could say I wouldn't do. There's nothing I can say that I don't have the potential to do, right? I would never, ever do that. I don't know. There are things that I say I can never imagine myself doing that now. But then again, when I look back at my life, there are averos that I did that I never thought I would do that I did do. So how could a person ever say, I would never, ever do such a thing like that? The world is filled with people who never thought they would do certain things and unfortunately did those very things and worse things. So the idea of constantly remembering your averos, I think, on a basic level, is to sensitize you to your weaknesses. I have frailties. I have temptations. And as much as I would like to think that I could stand up when the nisayon faces me, not necessarily. Vaharai, the proof to that is, look at what I've done in the past. I'm a good person. I've done many good things, but I've also done many, many, many averos, which tells me that I'm prone to temptation, which tells me that I am prone to sin, which tells me that I'm a fragile individual. And again, that's okay. I'm a human being. So by constantly remembering my averos, it's not that I'm beating myself up over what I've done. It's that I'm being real with myself. Because when people think that they're above temptation, and people think, that I would never, ever do that, usually they do that. But if I remember all of the things I've done, again, not as a way of beating myself up or making myself feel bad, but just as of reminding myself how incredibly fragile and prone to temptation I am, that allows me to lead life with a different level of awareness. I think that was the basic svara we saw in the Gemara. What Reb Tzaddik is introducing is something a little bit different. Reb Tzaddik is saying is, as you climb the ladder of spiritual accomplishment and become a better person, you begin to actualize your potential. And to a certain degree, when you begin to actualize your potential, it magnifies the sins of the past, which is very interesting. Because you're going to say, as I begin to actualize my potential, it shows what I really could be. Well, once I show what I really could be, then to a certain degree, it amplifies the failures of the past. If I'm capable of being this, whatever the this is, what I'm holding in life, how could I have done that? Right? So before I became this, before I reached this new level of spirituality, so that the sinful behavior might have been justified. Remember the marshal, right? Like the 2-year-old spilling the milk. Okay, it is, stuff like that happens to people on that darga, on that level. But once I reach this new level of accomplishment, I'm capable of this. I'm capable of this greatness. But once I'm capable of this greatness, this failure becomes even more magnified. So Reb Tzaddik says, therefore, it's this incredible, like almost strange dialectic on the more I grow, the more I have to reconcile for the mistakes of the past. It just requires a new tshuva. So according to Reb Tzaddik, I am perpetually locked in this cycle of tshuva, which again, Reb Tzaddik didn't make this up. This is the Gemara. The Gemara has an opinion that says you're constantly doing tshuva for the averos of the past. Just in Reb Tzaddik's model, it's incredible. The more I grow, the more I grow, the more I have to, and the more I see my capacity for greatness, the more I have to reconcile the mistakes I've made in my life. Now I will say, take a look, page Kuf Samach Gimel. It's really an incredible idea. Page Kuf Samach Gimel, bottom left-hand side. We're going to skip. He brings down this piece from the Arizal, which is actually quite amazing, and has to do with the fact of how the neshama is judged in Gan Eden as well. We're going to skip that for now because I want to get to this last piece. He says, "V'zeh tam sheyesh kan beruchnius ha'inyan shel yerida l'tzorech aliyah." So we're all familiar with this concept of yerida l'tzorech aliyah, that literally a descent for the sake of a future ascent. However, besvarim shemizdamenes lechol adam mipam lepam yerida mimadregasa bekodesh ulam tachlisa hi ligrom lo aliyah. Shabbos say the path of ruchnius, right? The path of spiritual growth is not a linear one, but rather, again, there is this concept of yerida l'tzorech aliyah. That more often than not, what happens in life is I take 2 steps back in order to take 3 steps forward. That's the way it works. That often when I fail, failure in life itself becomes the catalyst for future growth for a variety of different reasons. When I fail, often we become much more introspective in moments of failure than we do in moments of success. When I fail, I recognize what my weaknesses are, and therefore I know what it is that I have to work on. And when I fail, those moments, I realize life has not gone as I had planned it to, and therefore I really need to live with both hands on the wheel. But so we'll say that concept of Yerida Tzorech Aliyah, by the way, the concept of Yerida Tzorech Aliyah is in and of itself, I think, the most profound concept in Yiddishkeit. Because again, I will say, if you don't have the right perspective when it comes to failure, you get very easily derailed in life. If failure is just that, failure, then every time I fail, which is pretty often, it's just easy to give up. Masha'inki, in the concept of Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah, says no. Every failure paves the way for some greater future ascent. I know my weaknesses. I know what I have to work on. I know what I have to do. I know how I have to focus. Again, that becomes something dramatically amazing. But look what the Rebbe says. With this, we'll have to end. He says, "She'es shebebeis din shalom alam medaktikim bo ba'adam umakpidim al kol chid kal sheyesh lo hu es hayerida va'az tzarech ha'adam lasos tshuva ulahachnis belibo charata yoser amuka." Listen to this. Reb Tzaddik says, in my model, you know what Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah means? You know what it means? It means that every single time, he changes the meaning a little bit. It's Yerida Tzorech Aliyah. He says, Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah means that Yerida is a necessary part of every Aliyah. What does that mean, says Reb Tzaddik? That whenever I ascend the ladder of spiritual accomplishment, there's an automatic yerida involved in that. What's the yerida? What's the descent? The need to go back and do tshuva for my previous averos. I say every time there's an aliyah, I'm pulled back a little bit. There's a yerida into that which was. There's a descent back into chait. There's a descent back into the mistakes and the missteps of the past. There's a descent, there's a yerida back to go ahead and reconcile my behaviors. That's what's incredible, no? So every single, so there's a yerida that is a tzorech aliyah. Every single time I grow, I have to now take a step back, reconcile with the sins of the past. Now, once again, that I see my capacity for greatness, to a certain degree, it amplifies the chatam of the past. Because how could I have done those things if I'm capable of doing this? And the Rebbe goes on. He says, "Va'agmas nefesh v'atzar sheyesh lo mima sheniska b'chatav hu atzmo ba'enash." And I just want to point out that to a certain degree. So how do you do tshuva? In other words, that this is a pretty intense model, right? In this intense model, pretty much my entire life is always tshuva, right? So remember, I'm doing tshuva for the averos that I've done now, and when I grow, I'm doing tshuva for the averos of the past. It's like tshuva, 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 tshuva. So the simple answer is yes, right? Yeah, that's actually how it works. Life is actually constant and perpetual tshuva. But also on a deeper level, remember again a number of, this is going back months ago probably, we learned in Tzaddik the idea that sometimes the pain that you feel over having sinned is in and of itself the tshuva. That is in and of itself the tshuva. So Tzaddik says, Lav dafka, that this yerida l'tzarech aliyah is, let's say, an in-depth process of tshuva. Sometimes it's just the pain and the agmas nefesh. You know, as I grow in life, and I realize my mistakes, I have another epiphany, which is that how much greater I could have been had I not got sidelined by the averos of the past. Right? So, you know, you see this in life. You know, sometimes you see, you know, sometimes you see. I think often I find this like with children. You see with children, you see them doing something beautiful, learning or chesed or this, that. You think to yourself, you know, if I was doing that at that age, what I could have become. Right, what I could have been had I not made this mistake or not made that mistake or not gone down this road, all these different things. It's normal, you can't live life too much like that, but to a certain degree, that's the agmas nefesh of chait. And that agmas nefesh is in and of itself the form of tshuva. So both say, so if we just bring this together, then we'll have to stop. What Reb Tzaddik really introduces us to is this idea that every time we grow, spiritual growth requires some level of introspection into the past. Because as I grow and I realize what I can become, I am once again held accountable for what I have or have not done. And Reb Tzaddik says this is the meaning of the concept of yerida l'tzorech aliyah. That at the end of the day, every aliyah, every ascent, always comes with a necessary descent. What's the descent? As I go up, I am forced to also now go down and re-examine the sins of the past, do tshuva again, reflecting now that I know that I'm capable of so much, I must reconcile with the mistakes of the past once again. We'll stop over here. We'll continue Hashem next week. Shkoyach.